being recorded in, okay, thank you, Zoom. This is because I'm a co-host. Yes, got it. Just said that, Zoom. Clearly Zoom was not listening. It's being recorded. It will be on our website once it is uploaded. So just to start off, welcome to the League of Women Voters Informational Forum on the Tuscan Water District. My name is Claire Green. I am the first vice president of the board of our local League of Women Voters of Butte County. And to start, I have more than a few background remarks, and I'm going to ask you to bear with me because it's a little bit long, but I think it's extremely useful, especially if you may not know as much going in. Those of you who are experts on groundwater sustainability agencies and other issues like this, just read the paper for a second or two. All right, so I'll introduce our panelists in a little bit, but to start off, League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We are political, as I said, but we don't support or oppose any political party or candidate. The League has not taken a position for or against the proposed Tuscan Water Districts. We're offering this forum so that residents of Butte County, and particularly the landowners in the proposed district, may have access to more information to decide what path they feel is best for the county. So these background remarks were written by League members, but reviewed by our speakers this evening to ensure accuracy and fairness. So how did all of this start? For many years, groundwater levels have been dropping throughout California, including here in Butte County and parts of Butte County. By some estimates, groundwater storage in the Vlamis subbasin has dropped about 400,000 acre feet in the past 20 years. This is enough water to cover 1 acre of land and 400,000 feet of water. This indicates that while groundwater levels rise and fall over time, overall pumping of groundwater has outpaced the ability of natural recharge to replenish the aquifer. Local groundwater conditions are also affected by drought, which we all are experiencing now, even though it's been rainy the last couple of days, thank goodness. As we all know, drought depletes surface water supplies, which has led to more pumping of groundwater. According to the National Integrated Drought Information System, August 2021 was the driest month on record here in Butte County over the past 127 years, and 2021 is the 7th driest year to date. And I know we all really felt that firsthand this year. In an effort to deal with dropping groundwater levels throughout the state, in 2014, the legislature passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. So if anyone says SGMA through the evening, that's the acronym. That's the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. The law requires that groundwater levels in the most affected groundwater basins all over the state be managed and made sustainable no later than 2042. So we've got 21 more years to comply. Each of the groundwater basins covered by the law is required to develop a sustainability plan. In Butte County, there are 3 basins in this category: Vina, Wyandotte Creek, and the Butte Subbasin. Each basin has at least one groundwater sustainability, or GSA. So if you hear any one of our speakers say GSA this evening, that's Groundwater Sustainability Agency. The GSAs are tasked with preparing and implementing a groundwater sustainability plan for the basin. Tonight, we are focusing on the Vina Subbasin, which lies under northwestern Butte County from the Tehama County line to a few miles south of Durham. The Vina Subbasin has 2 groundwater sustainability agencies, which are working together to develop a sustainability plan: the Vina GSA and Rock Creek Reclamation District GSA. They have completed a draft plan, which will be submitted to the State Department of Water Resources for review in January 2022. So what's the Tuscan Water District, or TWD? It is not and would not be a groundwater sustainability agency. It would be a special water district. So what's its purpose? In their Local Agency Formation Commission application, also known as LAFCO, petitioners state, there is currently no locally controlled subbasin-wide special district in the Vina and Butte subbasins that can evaluate determine, fund, implement, and oversee various programs to implement the groundwater sustainability plans, GSPs. If you're counting at home, I think that's 4 acronyms so far, maybe more, and achieve groundwater sustainability. The primary purpose of the Tuscan Water District is to create a local special district to fill this gap. So no surprise to anyone, and the reason we're having this forum is that many people in our county, including 2 of our speakers here tonight, disagree with this evaluation of the need for a special water district of this type. Before we begin our discussion, just a few words about how a special water district of this type works. Under the formula provided for in the California Water Code for this type of district, only landowners have a vote in the creation of the district or in electing its board of directors. Moreover, each landowner's voting power is based on the amount of land they own. 1 acre equals 1 vote. Costs of running the district are likewise apportioned by acreage. A person who owns a 1 acre parcel pays less of the district cost than a farm that owns 1,000 acres of land. And we'll talk about this more. Landowners can be individuals, corporations, trusts. So it's a broad definition when we say landowner. Finally, where are we in the process? The Tuscan Water District, as currently proposed, would cover about 102,000 acres, mostly within Vina subbasin boundaries. We did have a map of the proposed TWD on our website for this event, so you can toggle back and forth if you want to see that. Landowners who comprise a small minority of all landowners in the proposed district, but who between them own land equal to about 60% of the total acreage, have submitted petitions to the Local Area Agency Formation Commission requesting that LAFCO approve of the district. If LAFCO approves the application, there will be an election in which all landowners within the proposed district would have a vote based, as explained already, on the amount of property they own. If the landowner's vote supports the TWD, it will be created with an initial annual assessment fee of $10 per acre. All right, so if you're still with me after all that, because of the high degree of controversy and public interest surrounding the proposed TWD, the League of Women Voters of Butte County has invited 2 representatives of the petitioners and 2 of the opponents to explain their positions and to talk more about what's going on. So myself as the moderator, I'm going to ask questions of the panelists. The League and members of the League have written some questions in advance just to get the ball rolling. You are welcome to, attendees are welcome to put questions into the chat. League members will be filtering those questions, not necessarily to filter them out, but I'm sure a lot of the same questions will come up, and so they'll be combining questions and so on, to make sure we just don't ask the same question 5 times. Let's see, please, if you can, keep your questions brief. And please, it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, keep it civil. Please, no personal attacks. All right, so our panelists tonight. Tovey, I'm going to butcher your last name, so I may have you say it later. But the proponents are Tovey Giezentanner, oh yay, spokesperson for the TWD, and Ed McLaughlin, a Butte County farmer and former Butte County Supervisor. And the opponents, Barbara Vlamis, AquAlliance, and Aimee Raymond, Butte County Water Commission. All right. So if you're a panelist and you're muted, you can unmute yourself because I'm about to ask you all some questions. So to get the ball rolling, first question, what specific actions do you believe the Tuscan Water District Board of Directors, if created, is most likely to pursue and for what reasons? And you can explain why those actions will be favorable or perhaps unfavorable for the community. And why don't we, just for fun, start with Aimee?
That sounds good. Well, I think if the Tuscan Water District is formed per their application, documents that they've disclosed, is that they would pursue projects that have been, approved by the GSPs, the GSAs, and those projects are listed in the GSP, to add another acronym, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. And the projects that they're most interested in doing is purveying surface water. So the Vina subbasin is mostly groundwater dependent. So you think in Durham and south, it's the agriculture is a mix of surface water and groundwater. And pretty much in the Vina subbasin, which is, Durham and north, is they use a lot of groundwater. So the interest, as the proponents of Tuscan, is that they're interested in moving surface water and making it available to the agricultural users in the Vina subbasin. So I would believe that they would be, looking for those water projects. To do that, they need to find a source of water. So the PID water has been of great interest, and the table A water out of Orville has been of great interest. So that would come out of, probably come out of Thermalito, is where you could, connect into table A water.
Great. Tovey, let's go over to you. And for anybody who doesn't quite know, PID is Paradise Irrigation District.
Another acronym. So thank you, Claire, and League of Women Voters. First of all, just a huge thank you for agreeing to jump into the waters, if you will, here on this issue. It is a little contentious, although I do think that there's more common ground than perhaps folks give us credit for. But it has been a little contentious. So we really appreciate you hosting this forum and giving us an opportunity to talk a little bit. So thank you also for your intro comments. I thought you did a nice job on that. Amy's right. There's basically 4 things, if approved, Tuscan would do. And of course, again, with me today is Ed McLaughlin. He's former county supervisor, currently sits on a number of different boards. And so I'm going to probably lead a little bit here, and then he's going to jump in at points. But if the Tuscan Water District is formed, it's going to basically look to do 4 different things. It's going to pursue projects to bring, as Aimee suggested, new surface water supplies into the subbasin. So that's obviously a key issue. It's also going to look to implement groundwater recharge and water efficiency conservation related projects. Now, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency has a public review draft of the groundwater sustainability plan. In that plan, there's a projects and management actions chapter, and it outlines 3 different types of projects that the plan looks at to solve, which is the big issue here, to solve the issue of overdraft. We're pumping more water than is being recharged kind of on when you look at this historically, right? So the problem is overdraft. And of course, we also have drought influences on this, but the problem is overdraft. And there are 3 different buckets of projects that the Vina GSA is looking at pursuing to solve the overdraft problem. One is bringing surface water into the area, okay? One is various types of recharge projects. And then the third is various conservation or demand management types of projects. So now let me hop back to Tuscan. If it's approved, we've talked about doing projects that are only consistent with what that GSP says you can do. So we'd be looking at doing those types of projects, bring water in, various types of recharge projects, and then various demand management conservation types of projects. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, let's go to Barbara Vlamis.
Well, if I specifically answer your question, there's not much to add. Aimee
Okay.
and Tovey laid out what everybody assumes they're going to do because it's in their forming documents. We disagree on some of the need and the reasons for what they're doing, but I assume that you want us to discuss that later.
We will certainly get to that.
Yeah.
And so Ed McLaughlin, anything else to add to what's already been said?
Well, this hasn't been an effort that was initially started by farmers. Actually, after SGMA law was signed by Governor Brown, we recognized that we were going to have to get organized groundwater users. I've always been an advocate of no groundwater leaving Butte County. I think my record pretty well speaks for myself. As a board member, we passed some ordinances and made sure that people couldn't sell groundwater, foul their land, sell their surface water, fallow their land and use groundwater. And that'll be the intention, if it's approved by the GSA, and we're requesting that they put in language at LAFCO that specifically says no groundwater will be exported, and any water that we import to bring into balance will not be exported at any time. It's a sustainability matter. We recognize that we don't want to become a disaster zone like the San Joaquin Valley that caused the subsidence down there. You can look, it's been about a foot a year, and it's got the canals messed up. The water quality is terrible. We don't want to see that happen in this area. We have a lot of small domestic users that we will also make sure that we protect. They're going to be the most critical ones to protect. And the city of Chico is entirely on surface water. So, groundwater. So at some point in time, most urban areas that rely totally on groundwater end up having water quality problems and have to find another source. And I think they're fortunate to have sources such as the PID water available currently. In the future, maybe the county water entitlement out of Lake Oroville that the Board of Supervisors has worked hard to protect ever since the dam was built. And then districts to the south of us, such as Western Canal, have surface water excess in some years. So if the GSA approves and says that water of that type needs to come in to make our area sustainable, then it'll take infrastructure that'll be very costly, as we well know. That'll have to be done, the cost benefit analysis, CEQA documents. It'd be quite a process, but at least we will have with the potential Tuscan Water District, we will have the vehicle to apply for grants and resources to solve any potential problems. And so I think that's a vehicle that we need. And the county has indicated that they didn't have the resources or ability to do it initially, and asked us to start the effort that we're in the middle of right now.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question, and I'm going to start with Barbara on this one. Let her answer first. So what impact, some of this may have been touched on in the previous answer, but I'm moving forward anyway. What impact would the creation of the Tuscan Water District have on county landowners / well owners in the Vina Groundwater Sustainability Agency that are not part of the proposed TWD, given that they draw on similar aquifers but would not be represented in the TWD? Barbara, we'll start with you.
Well, as most people probably know, that groundwater doesn't stop at a property line or a water district line. So people that are not in a district may be impacted negatively, or from their vantage point, they probably may think positively, by activities within this proposed district. The biggest concern for anyone in or out of the district should be that what they are proposing is exactly what the state, through the Department of Water Resources, the Bureau of Reclamation on the federal end, and water selling surface water districts have been trying to accomplish since the 1970s. And it's to the detriment of this area. Putting in infrastructure for artificial recharge or will place the infrastructure there to facilitate exports, which is what the state has sought in its planning documents since 1978. And it should be of great concern to anybody in Butte County that this district believes has maybe with the best of intentions had the DWR Kool-Aid, as I call it, that makes them think that performing all of these activities will prevent what has happened in the Owens Valley and the San Joaquin Valley. And I beg to differ that it would actually facilitate the demise of this area.
Okay, go ahead, Aimee.
If I could also interject, I think there's also a risk on the other side, is that the parcels and landowners who are within TWD would unfairly be asked to fund projects which benefits everybody who is in the subbasin. So you're asking for, if you think of the Tuscan Water District is in the bathtub, and projects that need to be done are outside of that boundary. The water doesn't know those boundaries, and so conceivably TWD landowners are paying to recharge that basin, for which a much broader area is benefiting from. And those outside areas are not being impacted by this. But to Barbara's point, it's like we're building a freeway. When we start to move surface water around and create pipelines or ditches or however when surface water has to move from a place where it is, which is south of the Durham area, north to Chico, you're building a freeway. And when you're building a freeway, the suburbs happen. And so the risk here is that we open up ourselves to, which is really is the future of water trading and water banking.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I heard the pause and I just jumped right in. Let's go to now Tovey and Ed.
You want me to go first? Okay. Okay, so several issues. The first is forming a California water district. There are 300 plus water districts in the state. So this idea that by forming a water district, essentially you're creating the demise of the area. It's hard for me to understand how you get from forming an entity where, like just south of us in the Butte Basin, there are 11 different water special districts just south of us. So it's hard for me to understand exactly how you get from forming a district to the demise of the area. That's a huge jump for me. And with all due respect, I have a lot of respect for Barbara, so I don't want to go too far on that. But I do hold that forming a district doesn't mean, and it doesn't result in the demise of an area, number one. Number two, what we're suggesting in our case is unlike how other districts are formed. We're saying, look, we fully expect, and we're asking LAFCO to include conditions of approval that would go into our formation document that would keep the water local, so that exporting of water that's brought into the area can't happen out of the area. So we're saying we're willing to accept that constraint on water moving in and out of the area, number one. And then the second is we're willing to accept a constraint that any project that we pursue be consistent with the groundwater sustainability plan that the GSA's put together. So we're saying the scope of projects that we're going to consider is within the bounds of what the VINA GSA says is acceptable. So it's not like we're coming up with these other ideas and pursuing them. We're saying, look, LAFCO, put conditions that put constraints on where we can go to try to answer those very questions that Barbara and Aimee raise up. So that's the second point. I think I'll just say, I think I'll leave it there. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I would add that some of the people that you are fearful of, DWR and the Corps of Engineers, state water contractors, we're fearful of them too. And so we think local control, landowners that have skin in the game are the right overseers and shepherds of this resource. And like all other resources, it's limited, it's critical. It's just like the blood flowing through our veins as farmers to have water. You can have the greatest soil, the greatest weather, but water is very critical to our survival and to our communities around us, Durham, Chico, Gridley, and we certainly do not want to put them in jeopardy. We want to protect them with protecting our industry of agriculture. And I know we get accused of a lot of different motives, and our motives are nowhere near to what we've been accused of as this process has moved along. And I'm pretty proud of the people that have been involved, that have put up money to help us get research and find out how you form a water district. We had no idea when we started. There's been a lot of effort going into it with good intentions, and some of the information we see on Twitter and Facebook that has got people confused and caused a lot of fear. This
So
unjustified.
Ed,
Hold on. That's
Okay.
not fair. We won't cut in for you.
That's fine. I'll leave it at that.
All right, real quick. I'm the only one allowed to interrupt. Rule
okay,
number one. I appreciate everyone being calm so far. Let's keep it good.
I have a point of clarification, but I
Okay.
don't, it's a little awkward because you can't, in this format, but is it, may I do that now, or?
Should I? I'm gonna
not
let Aimee go since
Okay.
she had something to say, and then I'll bounce back to you, Barbara. This is much less structured than our candidate forums, but I am trying to structure it to the extent that I can, because we at the league love structure. It's what we do.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Aimee.
I guess I wanted to point out that as a owner district, we're talking about 102,000 acres, but the petition to form it, with almost 60% was executed by approximately 67 entities, which are family trusts, corporations. They like to say, well, it was over 1,000 people. Well, it took that, that was the number of signatures on it. But when you break down who actually signed that petition, it works out to about 67, unique, family farms and related farms and, corporate multiple farms that the bigger farm owns and stuff. So what you're talking about is a very few number of people who will be in a point of, running the district. It takes a majority of the acreage and of the value, of that land. And there's 6,300 residents. These entities don't have to be residents. So where in the, when water districts were formed, they were meant, you worked with your neighbors, you saw them at church, you saw them at school, you saw them in the market. It has evolved. The largest landowner has 12,000 acres and is, based in Utah, is a global farming, industrial farming company. Their corporate, the decisions they make is to the benefit of their corporation, not to the benefit of Butte County. So while I appreciate landowner voter districts they worked in that era where you lived and worked with people. They are not working now where you have corporations and you don't have that peer pressure of having to face your neighbor and make decisions on things. So there's issues here. It's almost a virtual monopoly of who's going to run the Tuscan Water District.
Okay, I'm gonna let Barbara speak now since she had her point of clarification.
I would like to state that, Ed, I agree that many of the people involved in trying to form this, their motives are probably good. I've worked with many of you through 25 years on water issues, and we used to work well together. I think it's been to our detriment that we stopped talking as much together, and I hope we can get back to that, because what I see happening here is that while Tovey doesn't understand that it's the projects, Tovey, not the creation of the district just by itself, it's what it's being formed to do that is the problem. And that is what is the Department of Water Resources' dream that goes back to 1978 to lower the groundwater table here and get districts in this region to start integrating the groundwater into the state water supply. And while I recognize that you may believe that an ordinance on the local level will keep that water here, all it takes is a governor's emergency proclamation to throw out every other law. So we would be very vulnerable, and we have fought, my organization and my previous organization, for decades to try to stop putting in this infrastructure that would help evacuate this region.
All right, Tovey and Ed, would you like to give a response to the points raised before I move on to another question?
Well, I'm not sure it's really a question back to Barbara from my perspective. When we talk about the formation document and a condition of approval, I'm curious about her take on this, because I guess you're right. I do believe that the two things we're trying to lock down are keeping the water local and reducing the scope of what we pursue to VINA GSA, GSP consistent projects that are consistent with the VINA GSA, GSP. So by having conditions that lock those two issues down in the formation document, I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't see how that turns into the governor's proclamation, an emergency declaration sweeping our formation document away. That's what our belief has been, Barbara. So I'm open, I guess, like how much more should, and this is just an honest question to me. Barbara's an expert on this question. So I'm actually interested in her response on this. I mean, like there is no infrastructure put in. It's simply an entity until you do a project. And if those projects aren't moving water out and are consistent with the GSP, and that language is in our formation document, like how much more ironclad is it? And maybe it's not, and from your perspective, I guess. And so I don't know, it's really a question back to you, Barbara.
Or maybe Tovey, if I can ask you, you're asking to be formed as a California Water District, which is Division 13 of the California Water Code. And there's a tremendous set of powers that are given to a California Water District in the Water Code, where you can engage in distributing water. So, you can be engaged with other districts engaged in distributing water or exercising powers, may execute joint power agreements with any agency formed for that purpose. If a board deems in the best interest of the district may enter into a contract for the lease, sale, or use of surplus water, not necessary for use within the district, for use either within or without of the district. So there's very many powers that a California, they get to decide what crops in water shortfalls, what crops get grown, how much water gets associated to them. So you're suggesting basically gutting all of what a California Water District's powers are by conditioning them away. So why even, I'm still at a loss.
No, I'm not suggesting gutting. I'm suggesting that again, that it would be formed with those powers, but that those powers would be subject to a condition that keeps the water local, and that the projects that we do pursue and the powers that we do attempt to exercise are consistent with the GSA's GSP. And the GSA GSP looks at bringing water into the area. It looks at various recharge, and it looks at conservation demand management. So there's a wide scope of projects that we would pursue. But again, it's really back to Barbara, because I think you laid out the case that we're building the infrastructure to move the water out. And I just don't see how that happens when we condition with those two conditions.
So let's go to you, Barbara, since Tovey posed that question to you. Go ahead.
Very good. Thanks for the back and forth, Tovey. The GSP is opening the door to what I would call a destructive practices for our region. And that is why I hope that people will comment before the 31st of this month on the plan that is out for public review. And the reason I call them destructive practices, it comes to this language, you know, the replenishment of groundwater by use of groundwater recharge. My concern is not the formation of your district, but the practice of your district based on this door opening through the GSP to do the artificial recharge, put in the infrastructure, and here's where it falls apart, no matter how much local protection you think you put in, because I've been through this with governors and in lawsuits, is that as soon as a governor issues an emergency proclamation, for instance, for a drought, all laws get thrown out in the pursuit of health and safety. And so if the infrastructure is there and to move water and extract water from up here, which is what DWR and the Bureau of Reclamation and the water selling districts have wanted to do for decades, you will have maybe unwittingly participated in that by starting the groundwater portion of the replenishment that we have fought the districts on, and they have not implemented it to date.
So thank you. That was, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Well, I should share the same fears that Barbara has with the state and the governor's emergency order. But currently we have 102,000 acres, which is proposed district, that really has very little or any representation or clout when they do try to do things like she has suggested that they probably will try at some point in time. As urban growth grows everywhere, and they expect us to sacrifice more water and fallow ground. So I think it's a vote almost for getting a district that protects us and has the unity of all the landowners and resources to fight off potential problems or people that want to pump into the river and transport it to the Delta or south. I'm for building a dam, not a freeway, and keeping the water we have here. I think people may question our motives, but the ones that feel that we're trying to open the door to DWR and water getting out of here, that's the farthest from our intentions that anybody can imagine. And we not only have, I hear the criticism of the large entities like the Deseret Farms and the Crane Farms and the Paiva Farms, but I know those individuals, have worked with them, see what they contribute to the community. All farms up in the whole state are growing in scale, and to criticize people for success in expanding their farming operations, Cranes and the Paiva family started, with a small dairy or a small beekeeping operation, very successful. I salute success. Maybe that we should be worried about water going out in Sierra Nevada beer. Well, I don't. I congratulate Mr. Grossman on his success. So to criticize people that are successful and have the best interests of this community in their hands that they want to protect for their children and grandchildren, I think this is a real step in that direction.
Thank you, everyone. We're getting a lot of really great questions in the chat. I have a few more questions written by the league, but Satsi and Sandra, are we ready for some questions from the audience? Because we've got a lot of those and we've got 45 minutes left of our allotted time. I know we could probably go all night.
Yes. A couple of people are asking basically, why can't the VINA Groundwater Sustainability Agency implement their groundwater sustainability plan themselves? Why is the Tuscan Water District needed?
And so, Satsi, who should we start with? Maybe we'll start with, why don't we start with Aimee?
That's exactly my point, is that there is no need for the Tuscan Water District. The VINA GSA is empowered to, and is expected by the state of California to implement and make these projects happen. We're talking about 10,000 acre feet of water that we're overdrafting the basin, which is 4%. So if you figure that the city of Chico was able, I've heard reduce their water consumption by 30%. If you were just to ask the growers to save by 4%, and by Land IQ's own studies have shown that the growers have reduced their water consumption by 9% over the last 10 years. It's not a very big effort that we have to do. And the VINA GSA has actually identified an easy set of projects to do to get that 10,000 acre feet. So, and those projects are distributed. The Chico State University has a variety of conservation projects. The VINA GSA has grower education projects. We're looking at irrigation efficiencies. So the task at hand is not all that large. There are some districts in the San Joaquin Valley that are 200,000 acre feet per year overdrafted. That's almost our entire, use of water. So this is not a very big, issue here. And the GSA is already expected to do it. Rock Creek Irrigation District signed up for projects to do, which meet this goal. There's no need to add more government to Butte County and overlay Rock Creek and overlay Butte County for this district.
All right, let's go first to Tovey and then to Barbara.
Okay. I'm going to start again with the problem, just because I think that from our perspective, overdraft and drought pose an existential threat to groundwater users in Butte County, and for that matter, the Central Valley. And I'll say this: the 10,000 acre foot number is a number that's in between. Staff for Butte County have looked at the Butte County overdraft issue over the past 20 years. We have data, they've looked at it, and their models show that we're overdrafting anywhere from, on the most conservative or the most progressive, but anywhere from 1,500 acre feet per year to 30,000 acre feet per year. And the 10,000 acre foot number was just a number that was basically picked in the middle of those two extremes. But based on climate change, urban growth, all of these other factors, the problem is actually somewhere between 1,500 acre feet and could be as bad as 30,000 acre feet. And that's just the current condition. You add on top of this some of the issues, Claire, that you were talking about when you did the intro. And it's amazing to me, based on hydrology data, this ranks as one of the driest periods of the last 1,200 years. Something we've never seen drought at the scale and intensity that we see it right now, notwithstanding the rivers that are getting dropped on us right now. But Butte County, August of this year was the driest month in record over the past 127 years. It's amazing. Drought conditions are expected to persist in the West through 2022 and beyond. So again, to put that in perspective, during the last drought, 5-year drought, agriculture pumped 6 to 7 million they in agriculture in the Central Valley created a groundwater deficit large enough to fill an empty Shasta Lake 7 times, according to one study. Drought is happening. Climate change is happening. And it's not just that we're in an overdraft condition. We are in an overdraft condition, somewhere between 1,500 and 30,000 acre feet per year. But drought and systemic drought is happening as well. And that's the other issue. Okay, sorry, but that's an important, the problem is significant. So you have to deal with the problem. So the first issue is the problem. Then the second thing is, okay, so the groundwater sustainability plan says, look, there's different ways to solve the problem. One way is conservation. It's reducing demand. It's increasing ag efficiencies, right? That's one way to do it. And that's certainly on the table. But the agricultural community here thinks that it's not, you can't solve it just through conservation. You also have to figure out a way to bring some surface water into the area and look at smart strategic recharge opportunities as well in the region. So those are the three different types of projects. So that's the first piece of it, is you can't conserve your way out of this problem. The second piece of this, the VINA GSA does have broad powers and can implement projects. But the reality is, throughout the state, GSAs are working through partners to implement projects. GSAs are regulators. They've got a whole host of things that they have to do moving forward. And they're working through partner entities like water districts and others to implement projects in the state. Now, just south of us in the Butte Basin, there's the GSA, and then you have 11 other water, irrigation, and other types of districts that are implementing projects within the Butte Basin just south of us. So that's a local example. Another example down in the South San Joaquin is you have the East San Joaquin GSA. They're working with 16 different entities. And that's the model that's really being implemented throughout the state, is to work through partners. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Barbara. Go ahead, Barbara.
Well, that was a long answer to, is the Tuscan Water District the only way to implement it? But if you're going to take that amount of time to answer that, I'm going to throw a few things out for people to consider. Is that, yes, there are lots of people implementing projects, even Butte Water District, who put in production wells in a different county to circumvent the ordinance here in Butte County. So I wouldn't hold them up as an example of honorable behavior. They may be a local district, we want to get along with them, but they intentionally put in production wells in Sutter County so that they could do groundwater substitution transfers. What ended up hurting people in the Durham and Cherokee Strip areas during the drought and transfers of 1994. The thing is that all of this is getting to water marketing, Tovey, and it's what, like, I'm going to keep coming back to this. This is what DWR and the Bureau have wanted for a long time. They want people to get into the water market. They need the infrastructure in which to do it. This district looks like it's, happy to do the infrastructure. And I think that is what could be the demise of our region. And I'm going to read you a short clip from a Glen-Colusa Irrigation District grant, where they were looking at how can they get people off of groundwater that pump from the lower Tuscan Formation. And it states, the purpose of this activity is to describe and compare the performance of 3 alternative ways of furnishing a substitute surface water supply to the current lower Tuscan Formation groundwater users to eliminate the risk to them of more aggressive pumping from the formation, and to optimize conjunctive management of the Sacramento Valley resources. It continues to improve the Central Valley system-wide water supply through participation in the emerging water transfer markets. This is not a good idea for groundwater dependent people. And what we need to do, conservation is one thing. Another thing is, I think you've all read these articles that are coming even out of the San Joaquin Valley, which is where most of this overdraft has been happening for decades and allowed to happen because local counties and the state have had no backbone to stop it. But the importance of protecting your groundwater can also be done as they are realizing down there that they can't wait for reservoirs or even groundwater recharge water to come because there's no water out there. They're recognizing they're going to have to fallow massive amounts of land. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to do that, and I don't think Aimee is either. At the moment, we are within in the means of conserving our way out of this, and I think I would come back to what I said earlier, Ed. I think some of us that haven't talked enough in the last dozen years or more need to get together and talk some more.
Well, I'm going to second the need for communication always as League of Women Voters. Ed, I'm going to, Sandra, did you have a real quick?
I was just saying, if you want another question.
Okay, after I let Ed have his say, since I haven't formally allowed him to answer this question yet.
Well, it's, I mean, Barbara makes a lot of good points, but I still believe there's strength in local numbers. People that, you know, their livelihood depends on water, and whether that be a 5-acre ranchette, a homeowner, or a 12,000 acre farmer. It's very critical that we get an instrument that has the clout to protect it. And if you took the largest landowner example, with the investment they have and the amount of employees they have, I think they got just as much interest and need to protect this resource is the homeowner. So I'm not scared of the big landowners dominating this. The numbers that have been thrown around, the largest 4 or 5 landowners will have about 20% of the voting. And I don't know of any group that where 20% controls the outcome. I mean, certainly they have a large impact, but I think with local landowners that this will be beneficial to everybody that's involved as residents of Butte County. And there's a tremendous interest in water now. We saw it, Barbara saw it when they exported a massive amount of groundwater before Chapter 33 was introduced and hurt the farmers that were relying on groundwater in the Cherokee Strip. And we've learned from those examples that we don't want that to happen again. We don't want to become a San Joaquin Valley where we've had subsidence and all kinds of other problems that because they haven't protected the resource, and people were fearful of Sigma initially. Ought to be thankful for, especially in Butte County, because we do have some very many, not many, 5, 7 potential solutions with water around us on both sides, Sacramento River, the Feather River, the PID entitlement, the county water entitlement. There's a lot of those entities down where Barbara talks about, or maybe there's 300,000 or 400,000 acre feet short. They're going to foul. I just came from there 2 days ago. They're tearing out orchards and fallowing right now. Yeah. And I do not want to see that happen in Butte County. I mean, besides the farmer's interest, you take the farm equipment dealers, everybody, the employees on these farms, it impacts a lot of people beside the landowner.
Okay, so I'm going to go to another question from the audience. There's a lot of good questions and discussion in the chat, just bumping the reminder to keep it polite and civil. And also, I'm pretty sure the chat gets saved along with the recordings, so just bear that in mind. Sandra, go ahead. And I'm going to start with Ed answering this question, even though he spoke last, because I realized I don't think I've ever let him speak first. This is what happens when you don't use a chart like in a voter form. Anyway, go ahead, Sandra.
This is a question from Deborah Lucero, who is asking, will the constraints suggested by Tovey be subject to California water law or LAFCO law. My understanding is that this is a gray area and has not yet decided in the age of, has not yet been decided in the age of Sigma. So
I'm gonna go to Ed first. He can, of course, cede his time if he needs to, but go ahead.
The question again is?
Go ahead, Sandra.
will the constraints that have been suggested by Tovey be subject to California water law or LAFCO law?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of powers granted to water districts for very good reason. We want to limit some of those powers to, our main goal is to protect our groundwater and any potential export of current groundwater or surface water or any other solution oriented with imported water that we do not want to be sold. And it'd be counterproductive, I think, just by economics. So why would you build infrastructure to bring in water to solve a problem and turn around and sell it? First of all, the GSA should prohibit it. And I just can't imagine people want to divert water in and then back out into the river. Like Barbara said, you know, the governor and emergency powers that are frequently abused could take that control out of our hands, but we want as much control locally as possible.
Barbara, would you like to go next?
I cannot answer Deborah's question directly, but I guess I would just like to add once more how the state and many of the water contractors, the irrigation districts up here, have been planning this and not been successful, but Sigma is now opening this door. And the GSP so far is allowing some of these negative activities to go in. And I want to read to you just the name of a grant. That in of itself should shock people that this is what's been in the plan. This was from June 2005. The grant title was Regional Integration of the Lower Tuscan Groundwater Formation into the Sacramento Valley Surface Water System through Conjunctive Management. So I defer to Aimee on the issue of LAFCO or state law, but it sounds like it's undecided, according even to Deborah.
Tovey, let's go to you.
Oh, you know, I'm not an attorney. That's a good question, and I would suggest that question be posed to LAFCO. I'm sure Supervisor Lucero will engage in that process. I just don't know the answer, and I'm not an attorney, so I don't even want to speculate on it.
Aimee, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, let me, so LAFCO came into being after the whole Water Code Principle Act stuff got laid down. And it was meant to organize these little, you know, our local water districts, cemetery districts, mosquito districts and things. And so Water Code has a set of powers. LAFCO came in and said, we have say-so over the formation of whether you should form. Are you being fiscally sound in your behaviors, and have this oversight to them? LAFCO kind of says, you know, what powers and which powers can you do, but they are very broad. So in Rock Creek Reclamation District, of which I was a trustee, you know, Rock Creek can do irrigation, reclamation, flood control. And LAFCO can't really say, you know, they just say, are you swimming in your lane? And they don't really get into the weeds about what exactly, you know, is that exactly reclamation work or flood control work, and would it? So I think LAFCO, where the Tuscan says, hey, LAFCO, they can condition LAFCO, or LAFCO can condition us to swim in this small little lane. That's not been proven by LAFCO in any cases. And I think LAFCO would have a really hard time. They're not set up to do that. That would be a novel use. for LAFCO to be the policeman of whether Tuscan was, what work they were doing or not doing.
All
So
right.
it's to be proven. Yeah, it's to be proven, and yeah, go ahead.
I don't, with all due respect, Amy, I don't think that's true. LAFCOs regularly grant or not grant, keep powers active or latent. So again, I think we're all talking here above our pay grade. This is really a LAFCO question. And we're just, none of us on this call are attorneys or LAFCO experts. So I really think that's a good question that Deborah poses. I'm going to get the answer to it. I don't have the answer to it today. But we'll figure out the answer to that and get back to her.
Sandra, do you have another?
There's a question for clarification. So before we leave the topic, one of the participants asked if Barbara could clarify the implications of conjunctive use, or if anybody else could.
Well, Barbara, I'll start with you since initially they asked.
Conjunctive use is typically thought of as incorporating groundwater substitution transfers into a portfolio or water movement. And so it's pumping groundwater, selling surface water, such like what Glen Close Irrigation District just due west of us does regularly, and some of the other districts along the Sacramento River.
Okay. If anybody else has if any of our other panelists would like to add to that.
I know that there's different communities throughout the state where, for instance, like in Yolo County, the cities of Davis and Woodland for decades were on groundwater, and their goal from a water quality perspective and also from mainly from a discharge perspective was to get off of 100% reliance on groundwater. And so that community down there worked for decades to secure Sacramento River surface water rights so that they could diversify the supply for those two cities. So they were no longer fully on groundwater, diversify their supply, and they were successful. So that was another type of conjunctive use where a farm on the Sacramento River transferred some of its water, Sacramento River water right, to the cities, so that the cities, and then they built a joint infrastructure project to divert the water, so that the cities could get off of, in the critical months, get off of groundwater and use surface water. So that's another example. I mean, down in the south, in the San Joaquin, the Fryan example is another, I think, interesting model where you've got literally a dam and then infrastructure to move water from a dam to agriculture. Now it gets complicated, but the long and the short of it is that keeps those water users off of groundwater, keeps them on surface water. Now it's more complicated. Of course, that's down in the South San Joaquin, but that's another type of conjunctive use project.
Amy, anything to add?
I guess you can just look at our neighboring county in Glenn County, and you can see in Orland in which, dry well reports through the city of Orland and Corning, massive amount of dry well. They had a, town hall meeting, and what was striking was Glenn County Irrigation District was not even presenting on them. So here we know that the Glenn County Irrigation just did a voracious pump of 25,000 acre feet in Glenn County, right next to this area. You predictably, all the domestic wells have gone dry, and you see, well, you can come pick up water between 4 and 6 on Thursday afternoon. So sorry, and you should really get on municipal water. So again, you've put the burden back on the domestic well user. So while I agree, Tovey, you want the stability, you have to have a community talk about it. And with Tuscan, it would be controlled by the ag interests and the profit and the day-to-day operation of ag. And we can even see in our neighboring counties where ag has run amok and dried that, the amount of acreage that has gone planted in Glenn counties has almost doubled in the last 10 years over there. And they're, so sorry your well is dry. you need to pay and get on municipal water.
Well,
So I don't want to
Hang on.
see that happen. And you should know the Vina subbasin, we drain to Glenn. So when Glenn County starts sucking, that water's coming under the sack to us. Our water in Vina comes in, the Tehama County subbasin feeds into us and it exits out. Some of it exits out through the sack to Glenn. So it's kind of like, Jim Brobeck has a wonderful analogy. Is somebody has your ATM card and is making withdrawals out of your account. So we can diligently be putting in. We need to keep an eye on what Glenn County is doing over there.
So,
that makes your point. That
Yeah.
makes your point. Go ahead, because I was just going to say that.
That just because other people have made these mistakes, we're trying to find a solution, and everybody don't seem to think that we have any possibility of becoming a potential solution to a future problem that's going to grow based on circumstances beyond our control in other counties. So I think that the more insurance we buy with a water district and local control is to the benefit of not just the farmers, the domestic wells. We know they're 100 feet deep, 80 feet deep, 150 feet deep, and they need protection. And we're going to be providing that. And at very minimal cost to them, because the larger landowners on a cost benefit analysis are going to pay for the bulk of the solutions to prevent fallowing like we're seeing in the San Joaquin Valley. So I think everybody's arguments are almost making the point for the need of the Tuscan Water District.
so
I guess I've been advocating for, if there is such a need, we could have a Butte County Water District where it's one person, one vote, and everybody shares in the cost and everybody shares in the decision-making on it. I don't get why we need to have a landowner voted district that sits in the middle of the swimming pool then. If you're saying, if you truly believe somebody needs to wrap their arms around all of the white area and manage, water, then we need a county water district and one man, one vote.
Well, I thought earlier you were advocating that there was no need for a district, but you're saying if it's a one man, one vote district, then you're comfortable with that. Well, I think the people that are putting up their economic model and value of their property to fund it deserves to be 1 acre, one vote, or by the assessed valuation. And we have agreed to have a domestic smaller grower on it. And LAFCO may very well tell us if anybody that's small growers or domestic that wants out of the district, we're not going to force them to be in our district. So, I mean, they have that option too. I mean, I think we're affording them some protection that we're going to fund more than their percentage of participation. So I see it as a win-win for everybody, but obviously the one man, one vote consensus among smaller landowners makes it pretty hard to generate the funds that are going to take to create the solutions to solve the overdraft.
So real quickly, Aimee, thank you for bringing that point up about the Butte County Water District. That's obviously something you support. I'm curious, is there unanimity among opponents of Tuscan for a Butte County Water District? I'm just curious how far that extends. I don't know if Barbara supports that or not, or like.
No,
I'll
I
let
think
Aimee answer and then we'll go to Barbara and
Yeah.
give her a chance. Go ahead, Aimee.
No, I think I put that out there as a possible solution. I think you have a much better solution with the existing Vina GSA, which is Butte County sits on City of Chico and Durham Irrigation. And those members are elected to those bodies. The second alternative, low cost, low government, is to expand the scope of the Butte County Water Department, which operates under Butte County. Butte County is responsible for all of the white, the white areas, those areas which do not have a water district associated to them. So I think that there are cheaper, low government ways to solve it. I don't think there is not an appetite with the current Board of Supervisors to form a Butte County Water District. And so I think it would be a very hard slog. And at this point, it has not been worth pursuing, but I think a viable option.
So before I go to Barbara real quick, Aimee, to clarify, when you say white areas, you're referring to map color coding?
We call the white areas are the parcels which do not belong to a water district. So much of the Tuscan Water District is, I'm guessing here, Tovey, maybe 75% of it is what is not a member of Rock Creek, is not a member of the Sacramento Reclamation District, isn't a member of the Western Canal or Richvale Irrigation, some of these well-known, or Durham Irrigation. So they are parcels which do not have a water district.
That's right.
So they are by default managed by Butte County.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Barbara, you have the floor.
Claire, real quick clarification. When the state passed the Sigma law back in 2014, 2015, it looked around the state in all these different subbasins, and it looked at, basically, it kind of did an analysis of which acreage was covered by districts, special districts like water districts, irrigation districts, drainage districts. And then it looked at the acreage that was not covered by anything other than like a county, or well, it was really just county. And they designated those areas throughout the Central Valley as white areas. And so it's not just unique to Butte County. Butte County has around 100,000 acres of white area that's just acreage that isn't represented by any kind of district. It's just represented by the county. So that's in Butte County, but there's acreage like that throughout the state.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead if you have a response that you'd like to make.
Okay. I am not supporting the formation of a district at this time, and one of the problems with this comes back to what I said earlier, that we have a groundwater sustainability plan that is undermining, I think, our safety, our groundwater safety, however unwittingly. And so until we, as a public and farmers, all of us, we have to recognize we're in this together and talk to each other. We need a true accounting. Here are all these things that nobody knows, yet we're planning, like, for this 50-year future. We have a true accounting of the monitoring wells, the data, and the availability of results to the public, a true accounting of river water rights and the deliveries, the true accounting of current and historic water transfers and sellers in and without Butte County, a true accounting of current and historic extra groundwater pumping as occurred in GCID's district and RD 108 south of them by the senior river water right contractors, an actual understanding of our groundwater subsurface flows, the age of the groundwater, and how this impacts current and future water availability. And for people in an urban area, in particular, we need an accounting of the groundwater dependent ecosystems like urban trees or, the oak woodland savannas that everyone appreciates, and how they could be impacted by groundwater manipulation. And this all needs full disclosure in a report to the public. And until that happens, AquAlliance is going to fight a lot of this to the mat.
Okay, let's see if we can get a couple more questions in before 8:30. As I have said before, we could probably go until 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, especially answering all the audience questions, but we'd all be exhausted beyond comprehension. So Sandra, do we have another audience question that we can lob at our panelists?
I have several, but Satsi, did you find one that you wanted to ask?
Oh, well, there is one that kind of changes the focus a little bit to something more specific. The question is, would Table A and PID water be injected into the Vina subbasin? If so, under what conditions and who would have the right to use that groundwater? And I don't know if everyone knows what Table A water is, so maybe a quick explanation.
So let's see, who have I not yet
Barbara.
allowed to answer? Oh,
Barbara
Amy,
would be a
go
good one.
The GSP,
Barbara.
go ahead.
All right, I'm going to talk first. Barbara, why don't you go ahead and start since Amy nominated you to start?
Okay, my understanding is that PID water would be a substitute for Cal water to start using the surface waters imported from Paradise Irrigation District down to Chico in lieu of using groundwater, which would start recharging. This is called an in lieu recharge, where you don't use your groundwater and you're using surface water. One of that is one of the ideas. The Table A water, as I see it, would follow that once PID had a community in which to serve, then Table A, Butte County would try to route its water down the same pipe to Chico, trying to get Chico off of groundwater. And there are many reasons not to want to do that. Number one is water rights. Everybody, even served by Cal Water, retains their overlying right to the groundwater under their property for beneficial use. You do not want to lose that. Number two, you do not want to take the largest community north of Sacramento on groundwater off of it, because you're going to lose 100,000 plus people that are a voice to try to protect it. So you don't want to lose this massive number of people that are dependent on this groundwater source. And so there are other things to do, and the Table A and PID water discussion could take us, as Claire said, to midnight by itself. But that's a short answer.
Okay, I know Ed had something to say, and I see Tovey went off screen. So, yes, Ed has something to say. If Tovey could unmute. I heard what I think was like a clock gonging in the background. I think that's what muted.
Sorry.
So go ahead, Ed. You had something to say before I kind of shifted.
Well, I have been around long enough to know that groundwater, especially under cities that have been traditionally on septic tanks, some people recall the nitrate problems in Chico that had to be rectified. And over time, a large, tight urban area with storm drains and other concerns, eventually you have water quality problems. And I think a good, reliable source of surface water is an asset to a community as of Chico. And also, they're probably the only ones, Cal Water, we're not going to overlap their area. They're private water purveyor that has their own rules and regulations. But this water is pretty much too expensive also for agriculture. So I think, I'm not saying, who knows where it's going, and I'm probably getting my cart ahead of the horse, but I think some of the surface water in existing ag districts adjacent will be more a potential solution to the overdraft problem. The first water meeting I ever attended in the 70s was, we had an allocation out of Shasta Dam. There was going to be a canal built down through the Nord and Vina area. And all the people in that area, not all of them, but the overwhelming majority went and said, we'll never have an overdraft problem. Take that water and keep it. Well, they said, fine, we got plenty of people that wanted it. 30, 40 years later, we're seeing that hindsight is not that bright at certain times when we look at mistakes we've made. And that's why I don't want to see us make another mistake of not having a district that can help protect the most valuable resource we have is residents of Butte County and farmers.
Aimee, over to you.
Well, the PID water can play in two ways. One, it can play as raw water and be put down Butte Creek for environmental use. The challenge is getting PID enough money to keep them solvent. And the value for environmental water is very different. There are a lot of growers that are on Butte Creek who could then purchase that water and use it as surface water. Should it go down, should be able to go down Butte Creek. So that's one avenue. The other thing they talk about for PID water is sending treated water. So treated water would have to go down a pipeline. So because they want to exercise their water treatment facility there, and treated water is more valuable. It gets to be a very crunchy thing about who has ownership of it. If you he who injects the water or recharges the water owns the water. And that's to what Barbara's point is that if an entity owns that water and recharges it, then they own that water in the groundwater. And that becomes very dicey. And you've seen that in the Kern County area, where enough of that water got put in where the person who was injecting it said, now I own the water bank. And they literally went and put chains and shut down everybody's pump because they said that groundwater is my groundwater. That's where you get into problems. So recharged groundwater is not native groundwater. It changes ownership. The other issue with PID water is that the Magalia Dam is failing. And so who takes responsibility for it? So if you get benefit from the water out of the Magalia Dam, then you can be charged to as a percent responsible for curing of the Magalia Dam, which it's estimated at, I think it's about $20 or $30 million to replace that dam in about a decade. So that is not going to be a fun event for anybody, and nobody's going to want to sign up for that. So PID water is very interesting. Table A water, it's in Lake Orville, so it's a bit far south. So to use it in North Chico, in the Vina area, it has to be pumped. And so where are you going to, what land are you going to do eminent domain? How are you going to get that water up from, presumably Thermalito into the North Chico area? What path are you going to be? It's kind of like setting up a BART station. That's going to be great if they run the pipe next to somebody's field and they can tie into it and use that water. That's not so great if you're 5 or 10 miles that you're on the edge. So again, it matters who's running the water district, who sets the path that these water purveying, pipelines, canals, however they're going to move the water, where those pathways are. You're kind of stuck with maybe down Midway or using some of the, the creeks. So table A water is very difficult challenge on how you're going to get a hold of it and utilize it. But again, I want to reiterate is that he who recharges the water owns the water. So recharged water is not native groundwater. Its ownership changes.
Tovey, over to you.
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you for certain that part of our overdraft problem now has been created by people selling surface water to environmental organizations, which they've got the money to buy it. Butte Creek water that used to go to the Patrick Ranch, does not come in anymore. That's the area that's had the greatest overdraft problem, wells impacted in the north of Durham, between Durham and Chico. And I say that you could lay that blame pretty much at the fact that water that used to come out, irrigate pastures and orchards and Patrick Ranch orchards, now stays in the creek, moves right on down to the river with no recharge ability. The same with structures that have been built around Chico. I understand why they're built, Mud Creek, the diversions to keep Chico from flooding. But prior to all those structures being built, Chico had sloughs and areas where that water was slowed down and recharged. Now in a storm, the flows of those facilities is a lot of volume, and the rest of the summer, you can go look at them right now, maybe not today with the rain, but they've been dry. And used to, a lot of those areas, Barbara knows them. There was a documentary put on by PBS, gentleman from Chico State, that talked about the sloughs, and they definitely had a real impact on recharging that does not exist anymore, to the detriment of not only trees and habitat, our groundwater.
Okay.
Well, I think those are some of the projects that are part of the GSA, is to do that natural recharge out at Sand Creek, out, off of Rock Creek, and get that water into those natural recharge areas. So that's some of the plans. Go ahead.
Go ahead, finish your sentence.
No, I think we realized that some of those old recharge in Lindo Channel, where that is good for recharge, and how do we reinvigorate that and make that stuff happen? It's a program called Floodmar, where you are when the creeks are running at high levels, that you tip that water off and you slow the flow, and you get it and you spread it and get it to recharge the basin.
Okay, well, it's 8:30, everyone. We have so many more questions in chat. We have so much longer we could go, but it's time to sign off. I would like to let each of our panelists make a brief closing remark, just very brief, just to kind of round out the evening. Think elevator pitch. I don't know, just like any little tidbit of information that you want to leave people with, brief. So I'm going to start with Tovey, then I'll go to Barbara. So Tovey, go ahead.
Well, one of the questions I saw in chat, and I'll just respond to that real quickly. Ed mentioned that the county encouraged landowners to get engaged back in 2015. And that's true. And then by 2017, the county adopted a resolution urging landowners to get involved. And that if they did, they'd work collaboratively with those landowners to form a water district. In 2019, the former water director also encouraged Tuscan to get back to the table and start forming the district. So there's been a 5-7 year process by these landowners working with various stakeholders and county staff and others to move this process along. And we're just at the tail end of it now, where we're in front of LAFCO, but it really represents a 5 to 6 year process. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Barbara, final closing remarks.
I would just like to say that there's a possibility for people to talk and try to reach some consensus on ways to move forward, but it's unfortunate that so many stakeholders were not involved in the process that Tovey brought up, and so we are here with great conflict, and that should illustrate to anyone that means people were left out. And I would just say that sometimes it's better to bypass, county staff and to have conversations of our own.
All right, Ed, final brief remarks.
Well, it's just unfortunate that my old theory is no good deed goes unpunished, but I know our motives are sincere. We all have children and grandchildren. We're proud of our industry, and this is a resource that us, as well as all our neighbors, need and depend on. We want to make sure that that's dependable far into the future. If somebody had a better answer, a better solution, than our Tuscan Water District. We'd have welcomed it. We're gonna, if we get formed, we're gonna certainly work collaboratively with Rock Creek, if the Sand Creek project looks viable. I mean, we want to cooperate and integrate all our resources to make them effective, to reach a solution to meet the Sigma guidelines. And I'm glad we're working on that line. We should have been working that line 20, 30 years ago. But till you have a crisis, usually nobody looks for a solution. We have a crisis way worse in the southern part of the state, and we don't want to mimic that at any time in the future.
Okay, thank you. Aimee, final closing remarks.
Yeah, I think my closing remark would be that there's no need for the Tuscan Water District. The objective of Tuscan is to assure that ag has sufficient water to continue to do agriculture. And I think we've seen that in the existing GSAs, that is what is at heart. And there's a variety of programs that already address that. What is not clear with Tuscan is that there's two camps that are involved there. There's a camp that are serious medium to large size growers who want to continue, growing and assure that their businesses will operate now and into the future. But in and amongst them, there's a second camp who I believe want to be in the water market business. And they want Butte County to be a player in the water market. And this is the new IPO that they are purchasing land, they're purchasing water rights, and they're trying to make sure that they can play in the water market. And to be in the water market, you have to have surface water to trade with groundwater and move it around, and it becomes a shell game. So it's uncomfortable that we are fighting the same fight. We are passionate about water in Butte County, that Butte County water stays local and it's here for the good of all of them. We're passionate about agriculture here, but there are players, there's DWR and other players who want to build a water market, and Butte County is rich and ripe for the taking for it. And Tuscan is a vehicle for some of those actors to make that water marketing happen. And so again, there's no need. If you truly want to be sustainable, we can do that right now with the Vina GSA and the Butte GSA and the Wyandotte Creek GSAs.
Okay, so that wraps everything up. I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Tovey, Ed, Aimee, and Barbara, for joining us. This is, as we can see, tonight and beforehand and subsequently, this is a contentious issue and will probably remain so. But I appreciate everybody doing their best to present the information and their points of view. I'd like to thank so many members of the public, whether you're league members or not, for attending tonight. I really appreciate it. And hopefully the discussion can be ongoing, the education can be ongoing. And that's what the league is here to facilitate. So I'm going to sign off. As I said at the beginning, this was recorded, including all the questions that came through chat, even ones that we didn't get to answer. So it'll be available on our website as soon as it's, uploaded to the cloud and all the things there. So thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and keep an eye on our website for upcoming events, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.